We have quorum. We'll ask the member for Kokopo to lead us in prayer.
Thank you, Father. Kubla gordo mari-mari na forgiveness. Mipla lo this morning mipla committee, Prime Minister blo mipla, opposition leader na all geta members lo two plus sides one time lo this house igolo an lo you, Father, lead him all geta discussions lo this day today so that mipla can talk all important issues that by affecting country blo mipla. Salim Holy Spirit blo you by leading mipla. Lord get our discussions today. But in this far, you will get a call him the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven.
Hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. And forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Any petitions? Notices? Honourable members, question time. The Honourable Member for Karikuhiri.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. My question without notice is again related to, or directed to the good Minister for Works. I want him to be aware that the controversial contractor I've raised regarding, or who is currently working on the Trans-Island Highway between Berena and Apanaipi Bridge, has gone ahead to not paying the Aipiana landowners for the gravel they are taking. In fact, they brought in rogue policemen with high-powered guns, chased all the villagers away, and have taken full control of the gravel pit area where their camp is. Now, my question is this the kind of attitude we want to display to our Papua New Guineans? And I guess this concern raised by the Aipiana villagers is in line with what Sir Dr. Pukatemu raised last week, where, you know, if local contractors can be considered seriously, so we don't have to encounter such encounters as what is happening now. The biggest thing here is let us learn to respect one another. You know, such attitude displays a lot of negativity on whatever part of the region of Papua New Guinea we do come from. And every human being is unique and behaves uniquely. And so I guess when you provoke them, they will treat you in the same way, manner, and fashion. So my question is, Minister Save long this la problem we work lo come up long one pla road lo mi or no gat or lo Hiritano highway blo yumi ogera. It's a national road, national asset for government of Papua New Guinea. Secondly, me like to thank you too long. Sampla will walk come up long Laloki Brown River portion of the road. But I guess if the minister with his commitment on the World Bank funding for that portion of the road can be fast-tracked because the volume of traffic that this road as a national road takes up every second or every minute is taking up all the good work and intentions by the department who is responsible for that road anyway in Dasna, all this kind. So road them bagarap close to us. So me like ask him Ken or remind the minister also toko right lungem long well bank, give him help him long, silim this la road, he come walk by, come hurry up or no gat. Emta sol to la question blumi. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Minister for Works.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Lord. Brother Member Blokari Guri ask him question kendo Law Road. Mr. Speaker, tamemi talk long contractor, controversial contractor, Mr. Speaker, me like Becky Mosem, me like talk Osem. So Osem me one pla legally pro forma contract Osem 200,000 or 300 or below 500,000. And Mr. come straight underneath long all 1-1 provincial works. So responsibility stop underneath the provincial works, but me find him out. Secondly, me talk long contractor he go kiss him materials or some road-based materials long all locals na ino pay him. Mr. Speaker, no got one la contractor me got right logo kiss him road-based materials lo one la contractor one la group of locals nothing without their permission. He got provision, Mr. Speaker, long buy more materials. So was one la contractor me work lo kiss him materials nothing. Then am by wrong. Normally there's some form of payment for every cubic they extract from the locals. So Mr. Speaker, me guarantee my brother members and by me find him out one contractor, dealer contractor he work locks in materials whether why I'm not paying more locals location. So I will give that answer to him in this parliament term of sitting. Second question law Laloki Golo Brown River, Mr. Speaker, me one very important section. Road ceiling as far as Laloki now, but from Laloki Guantalo Brown River, the road has fallen apart. Mr. Speaker, contract has already been awarded. Funding came through the World Bank, but all terms and conditions from World Bank are very, very strict, especially when it comes to environment. So me believe was any time as soon as a contractor me submit him all these environmental all plans, there should be no reason why that particular section of the road should not be upgraded. But having said that, Mr. Speaker, government too, got Tintin law. You mean said some states continuing this law from Laloki River going up to as far as Brown River. You mean it law upgrade him now? If need be, we can even open it up to a 4-lane and then we move the city up that way. Mr. Speaker, this is not a new thing that I am coming up with or proposing. If you fly over, if you drive up along the Hiritano Highway, you will see that a lot of companies have now moved up that way, and there's a lot of manufacturing as well as major companies operating from there, which provides a lot of employment as well. And I think when we have an opportunity, it is better for us to open up to as far as Brown River. So Prime Minister has mentioned that already. And as soon as we're able to find some money, hopefully through the bank loans or some law, BSP, which we've tried to talk to the chairman, there will be some, that would be a good opportunity for us to expand the city as long as the local people are happy with that proposal. But to conclude, Mr. Speaker, I'm contract with what you finished was over 80 million kina. But just because long all terms and conditions for World Bank ME strict, so I am sure as soon as the environmental plans by the contractor is submitted and approved, road should start. But I will try and I will talk to Secretary Were and get him to talk to the contractor and find out what the contractors doing, how far the contractors gone, and I will respond to the member in writing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member, Governor for Oro.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, my questions are directed to the Prime Minister, and they are in relation to recent alarming events when, on the 24th of February, Russia is said to have invaded Ukraine. Deputy Speaker, there are serious consequences of this event on trade, and no doubt Papua New Guinea's economy will also be affected in some way or another. My questions are this. Is the government monitoring the situation and its impacts? What are the observations? And what possible steps will the government take to mitigate any situations, negative situations arising from this event, such as the increase in prices? Thank you.
The Honourable Prime Minister.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I want to appreciate the Governor, Oro Governor's a good question. It's an important question, while short as it may be, has a strong implication for the well-being of our country and our citizens. The crisis that is taking place in Ukraine between two neighboring nations has a global effect. The effect of what happens in different parts of the world does cascade to different economies globally. Yes, we would have seen COVID-19 has a global effect on the economy. Likewise, the present crisis between Russia and Ukraine has taken a direct hit in global economy. Most of it would have been seen. In fact, this morning I was supplied a brief from Treasury. The price of crude oil, for instance, has gone past $103 a barrel. That's from a Brent perspective. And that is a scenario that we are monitoring very carefully, simply because it has a cascading effect on not just our own local economy here, but global economy. Our economy is import dependent in almost 80% of all our goods that we take, including fuel. And we're working closely with some of major fuel importers, for instance, in the space of fuel with Puma, with ExxonMobil, to try to see how best we could minimize the effect of increased price at the Bausa, and increased price in our common household goods that every Papua New Guineans and residents would feel the direct effect of such burden that is imposed by what is happening at Ukraine at the moment. In as far as our position on the Ukraine matter, we've allowed for our ambassador at the United Nations to participate in a high-level United Nations Security Council meeting that is taking place. Our country statement will be released, and that is for both sides to find peace by peaceful means, and for reconciliation and dialogue to take place, respecting sovereignty of each nation. And so that statement our United Nations ambassador will release. But locally speaking, with the possibility of increase in cost of goods and services as a direct result of the global economy that will be affected by the crisis in Ukraine, we've on one front asked ICC to have a look at how best we could control the increase of price, especially at the common goods like fuel and food that Papua New Guineans has everyday demand on. So ICC has been signaled to have a look at the price increase that might be taking place. From Treasury perspective, Treasury has been signaled to have a look at how best for us, if there are need for subsidy,
to be given if the inflation related to the crisis does blow up in our face. So Treasury has been also directed to work with ICC, and on our own, for us, if need be, we might come back to Parliament to give subsidy to most basic needs in our country, especially food and fuel, so that the burden of this crisis is not felt in a big way in our local economy. We also observing there's a good side about what is happening. Price of oil has gone up, price of gold has gone up, and so there'll be a trade rebalancing that might take place. The increase in cost of goods and services in our country may be a little bit matched with national government through our treasury picking more from the benefits that is associated with increased prices of oil and gas and gold in our country. So that can be balanced up at the side. So below at the consumer level, we're looking at how best national government could offer either subsidy or discounts, and a different combination has been looked upon by Treasury. In due course, we will announce to our country as to what we will do in response to inflation, if there's a hyperinflation directly as a result of what is happening at Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Member for Kiribina, good enough?
My questions go to the Minister for Health, the hardworking Minister for Health. Mr. Speaker, a few days ago I received a phone call from my doctor from KG, Kiribina Good Enough, and he's mentioned to me about the outbreak of a flu-like symptom, infection that is causing pneumonia, that is causing people to even panic. And we all know about the much talk about COVID virus that has affected our nation. And so, Mr. Speaker, question below me, my questions are framed in this way. About 6 months ago, we were able to receive some supplies from Health Department, and that happened to be about 6 cartons of various drugs. However, that's 6 months ago, and I am reliably informed there are contractors who are supposed to be taking charge of freight of medicines and drugs to all provinces and districts. But a lot of these contractors get the drugs down to Alatau, and they forget there is an island called Kiribina Good Enough, an electorate called Kiribina Good Enough. And they dump it in Alatau, expecting the cargo to fly itself to the islands. And so, in the last 7 years, the Kiribina Good Enough DDA has taken charge of our own supplies of drugs and medicine. Borneo Pacific supplies it to us, we put it on Tropicare direct to both islands, Kiribina and Good Enough. And we cannot continue to do a responsibility that is already been contracted to a contractor to supply medicine to our islands, to our provinces. Osem, the question below me, Osem, with this flu outbreak, the symptoms of pneumonia and other infections, one time by Health Department pull their socks up and make certain that remote places like Kiribina and Good Enough, suppose you don't have supply Marasin Golo Island, leave it here with us. Lo potmos piet, lusi manta mipla. Rini mipla na mipla by kisim na deliver Golo people blumipla. Otherwise, you take it down to Alatau, it sits down at the provincial...
Honorable Member, get your question.
Thank you. It sits down there for months and months, and sometimes the drug bagarap na inosagolo island blumpla. So I'm questioning Blumi Osem, when can all contractors pull up their socks and make certain that all districts blumpla receiving all marasin? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister for Health.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I thank the good member for Kirrawinna good enough for his question. A very important question which our government is trying to solve in the next coming months with our new programs that the government will be putting out in drone delivery systems. But getting back to the drug distribution in our country, as the good member has said, it's very it's lacking in delivery right to the door of the rural areas. So what I will be doing is doing an investigation with the Milne Bay Provincial Health Authority, which is the authority on the ground, and then we will get to the bottom of this and find out why the logistics companies are dumping medicine at the provincial headquarters instead of delivering them to the rural areas, because that is what they're paid to do. Within the next month or so, we should have this new drone program up and running, and not up and running, but delivered to the National Executive Council so that it cuts out all these middlemen and it can go delivery straight to our rural areas. So with that, thank you.
The Honorable Governor for Western.
Tinitilo, ask him question noga toksawe. Question noga toksawe blomia mi directing bolo. Minister blo Wex, Papa blo Rot, blo country. Thank you through question blomia in relation to one of the projects in Connect PNG in my province. 2020, Mibla bin studies the Connect PNG program. Na Mibla bin funding one of the project lo Daru na namba lo Orioma Wipim. 2020 Mibla gi la contract, kalau la kontrakta na Mibla provincial government Mibla baim. Seb belum lo counterpart lo Daru Island. The road, the contractor has done what he could do with what we've given. Na contractor sina nothing stop because we don't know this la money when national government talk by giving me plan. So I mean like asking one time by national government give him. And question one domain in relation to Daru town roads. Now the question domain lo side law Oriomo Wipim Mohet Road Gosen law. Sota me talk thank you lo national government and recognizing this road na puti money law. Connect PNG. Yes, 2020 me black pin kisim on the contractor. The contractor is on the ground. I'm kisim samla money blow 2020. Na I'm not kisim samla money blow 2021 yet na. I'm gonna ask him walk him close to finish na. Samla money bakam on ogat. Thank you through him question lo tubla question lo mi kamare Nelson.
Minister Blowex.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Lo Namila to thank you, lo Honorable Governor, lo Western Province. Mr. Speaker, very important question. Throw them something you me all get work lo cry long and lo all get that. Now, Mr. Speaker, Miss Awesome lo Daru. M1 plus big problem lo Daru M1 M funding. The number two plus block materials very, very difficult. So lo building road lo Daru it's a really a tough case. That's why we need more money when we want to build roads in places like Daru. Mr. Deputy Speaker, me need lo talks about lo governor by me go past them the department na ask him department law status law this particular road, even including the other one, Mr. Speaker. Funding has always been a problem. Last year some allocations have been come up. 2022 got all allocations from all roads lo Daru. That's why contracts have been awarded. But for us to continue to carry out this project, we will continue to need money. Unfortunately, we must talk of some Miblalo department, kisim full allocation belong, all appropriation belong 2020 na 2021. Amas warrants have been released, na Amas checks have already been written, one MME outstanding, all that is Governor Bami respond to you in writing. No good me gets fire and again want la answer in a right. So thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I will give a detailed response to the Governor in writing. Thank you. This week.
The Opposition Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, me like ask him, stop law notice paper, I call Prime Minister. Mr. Deputy Speaker, ask him in relation to resettlement law settlers is stop inside long care center law Bulolo. Mr. Deputy Speaker, me just like refresh in mind me plogata long 17th of May 2010 even it got big ethnic conflict and been come up lo Bulolo. Na plenty all citizens all been displaced we all stop lo care center mostly all blow civic. Na only been displaced, na plenty all house only been cooking, na plenty heavy been come up lo display time. Mr. Deputy Speaker, long 2010 October, Sumari Polie government lo display time, acting Prime Minister Honorable Don Polie been carrying 2 million kina as an intervention program long resolving this issue. Ethnic conflict where been come up lo Bulolo. Now me been one good intervention where issue long ethnic conflict been resolved lo display time. But still, Mr. Deputy Speaker, all people stop long care center yet. And these people are citizens of our country. These people have contributed to the development of Bulolo and Wau and Papua New Guinea. Since then, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there has been no intervention by the Bulolo District Development Authority. There has been no intervention by Morobe Provincial Government, and also there has never been any intervention by the national government. Asking Blomigolo Prime Minister Morsem, these people are now living in care centers now. You got big law and order issue may come up. You got issue long health issue may come up. You got social issue and go big problem yet. Me like asking Prime Minister when them plan long national government, long resettlement, long this people me all citizens of Papua New Guinea is stop care center lo Bulolo. And me 12 Christmas now, the no got one action and me come up long all get a triple levels of government. Bulolo District Development Authority, Morobe Provincial Government and National Government. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Deputy Speaker, me like, excuse me. Me like to thank you, Opposition Leader, ask him a very important question. Long line stop long Bulolo Care Center. Pass them through. Me like kissing this time. Talk big plus sorry. Go line stop long Bulolo Care Center. Suppose mipla lo past looks out this issue outstanding. Using this question, but me kissing all agents lo government who said enough look lo this lo work lo display, and we'll give a response to the nation, but more importantly, online stop lo Care Center. Lo give me finding permanent solution. Most of this has third generation and second generation people who Papua New Guineans who are living in Bulolo. As in many parts of our country, you may get our second, third generation Papua New Guineans who've moved from their original home to their settled home. And our country must have solution for this second or third generation Papua New Guineans who are elsewhere. Lest we forget, we one country, one people, one nation. we must have solution for them. And I just want to say sorry to these people in the care centers in Bulolo for national government not responding to them. We will try to look into a program for those who want to, without the aid of specific policy on this one. As Prime Minister, I'm just making reference to what might happen. For those who want to go back to the original home of origin, we could work on a repatriation program. But for those who want to be in this place they call home now because they're second or third generation, the national government will look at finding a permanent solution so they settle without disturbances to the original, the settling on land that is properly earmarked instead of just squattering on land that is not theirs. And we'll look into a program that will give them a permanent solution. I just want to thank the opposition leader for raising an important national issue that has not been addressed for so long. Thank you.
The member for Como Magarima.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Give me time to ask him. Question in talk sawe by golong Minister of Petroleum, Mining Minister, but because to play no stop long here, so by me directing question in talk sawe golong Prime Minister. Question blomi am related long gas to electricity project power plant am stop lo nogoli long heights where me walk long supplying power ego long Pogora gold mine gas stop inside long heights project is supplying power ego long Pogora long 30 years me start long 1992 he coming up long now me close to 30 years now. Now, misawe osem nubla Pogora mine negotiation long talk involving continuous supply of gas long providing electricity long Pogora gold mine. Long close 9.6 long license PDL1 license-based benefit sharing agreement. And we expressly talk long state by acquiring this power plant where currently previously Pogora joint venture operating, owning operating, currently a MOLSG operating. But this clause long LBBSA, PDL1, and we talk state by acquiring long current operator and transferring Miko long provincial government, one time landowners, Bioli can own him this power plant 50-50 basis. Question blomi emi kamosem state or government is taking one position on this long transferring this power plant equal of provincial government na landowners or nogat. Suppose in Nogat, why am I not come up? One time member come up. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Let me appreciate the question by the member for Koma Magarima. In his electorate, I think the PDL1 gas resource straddles in. The government position is quite clear. If the section he's pointing to in the LBBSA agreement for PDL1, the clause 9.6, if that is the reference point he's pointing to, then that was the latest or the last and current government position as far as the Heights gas to electricity project is concerned. And so I will get our government missionaries to have a look into this provision and see whether we could activate this. Just for the record, the Heights gas to electricity project at the moment I think is not operational. That is shut at the moment due to the excess of gas from the Heights gas resource from the wellhead number 1, wellhead number 2, and wellhead number 3, especially wellhead 1 and 2, is being depleted as the LNG resource is taken from the other part of the PDL1 reserve. But having said this, to answer the question, the current PNG LNG also has a small provision for DMO to access some additional gas from the current site in the PNG LNG gas plant. We are looking to work in a program to access gas-fired electricity from the current LNG supply also, and not just for Hela province, but to supply the 5 highlands provinces to supplement or complement the supply of electricity from the Yonki hydro plant. So that is a work in progress for us to access gas from there. Let me assure our landowners and people, the provincial government up there, that clause is already, it's just getting the instrumentalities or instruments to be tidied, and we could work on a transfer that is within the meaning of the clause in the LBBSA agreement that the member made reference to. In fact, just in passing, it comes to my mind, there was a clause in the original high gas to electricity that after 10 years, since 1990, that transaction would have taken place. That did not take place up until the PNG LNG agreement was signed. And so it is outstanding. We will have a look into this one, and hopefully national government should put a conclusion to this at the very earliest. Thank you.
The Honourable Governor for Manus.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Question blomi by Igolo Minister of Higher Education. But the look also suppose seminar stopped and by Prime Minister Ken by he halvi mim Ken lo this question. All colleges, na universities, all work charge him all fees all mangi lo attend him class 75% or 80% of school fees. School fee also before. School fee now 20,000, 14,000, 10,000. Now all plan the parents in on up afford him lo put him pikini belong all school. And some la all got tubla pikini ni all must decide lo one nungut pa ino can go school or university. Question lo me now igulo Prime Minister also. He got some la road you can walk him. So that this percentage of 75%, it must come down to about 40% also, so that all parents in up afford him. You may yet you play survey also beginning bloya, and all accounts play you may all get a close yet assist him. And going into election, normally PSIP and DSIP, suppose ombudsman pass him, but you may not help him to also Martin. So question now you also he got some la road you mean up Lotoki all colleges na universities. Suppose all not reduce all these fees, and over time during the year, all parents can pay him so that all Sumatini can go to school, because it is a real issue at this time. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Prime Minister.
All right, thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Thank you, Governor Manus, important question. And his suggestion for us to talk to our university councils and college administrators to ensure there's a lighter request on our people, on parents and citizens, not to pay the school fees upfront, in majority upfront. Certainly a good suggestion. We have already sent signal to our universities and colleges in as far as the school fees concerned, especially to look at how the student higher education loan program is administered. That should be used to assist in ensuring that students who need that income supplement or the fee supplement be supplemented with the health program, as well as the normal hackers and testers school fee that we are rolling out. I just want to assure the Governor for Manus, we will send word out to all school administrators to see whether there could be lighter on our parents in asking the balance to be paid in the second quarter or third quarter, and use government's higher education loan program as well as government's testers and hackers program to keep the students in the schools instead of having a heavy demand on parents and citizens at the very earliest. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Alatau.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I've got a question for our hard-working Fisheries Minister, now that he's present on the floor. And it is a question without notice, although I've had some communication with him, so he will be aware somewhat of this particular issue that I'm raising. But at the outset, and in the first place, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to pay my respects and acknowledgements of Grand Chief Sir Michael Thomas Somare, seeing that it is the first anniversary of his passing. We continue to acknowledge this great man on this floor and throughout our country. I know our people are acknowledging him. I also do the same, and I mentioned that our Abel family has a special relationship with the Grand Chief, particularly through Sir Cecil Abel, who was our Grand Chief's lecturer at the Admin College back in the 60s. He was also one of the founding fathers of the Bully Beef Club and, of course, the Pangu Party. And Sir Cecil Abel went on to become the first regional member for Milne Bay. But he continued as a Grand Chief's chief advisor, and so I had many fond memories of sitting in Waigani and listening to Grand Chief and Sir Cecil and even Sir John Guise cracking jokes and telling stories there, and it was a wonderful privilege to listen and benefit from the words of wisdom from this great man. But otherwise, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as I mentioned, there is an issue that I've raised with the Minister for Fisheries in relation to 5 long-line fishing vessels that entered the waters of Milne Bay and anchored at Alotau in January of this year. The public noticed those vessels and alerted myself to it, and I subsequently made inquiries to our Governor and our PEC Chairman for Fisheries and even the Provincial Administrator, and none of them were aware of these boats and what they were doing in Milne Bay waters. So I subsequently messaged the good minister that if he would find out some further information on that. About a week later, I received a 2-page brief from our Fisheries Division of the provincial government that these vessels were here to fish in Milne Bay waters through the National Fishing Authority, and we're going through the final licensing requirements. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have these questions in relation to that. Number one, to the Minister. In recent times, we have had a disaster in terms of licensing of the Bêche de Mer fisheries season in Milne Bay, resulting in massive depletion of the stock and even associated law and order issues in relation to the harvesting of the Bêche de Mer. I think primarily due to licensing, wholesale licensing issuing from Port Moresby, with a lack of proper consultation with the provincial government or with the resource owners or LLG authorities. And is this another example of this trend, Mr. Deputy Speaker? Number two, who owns these boats, and why is there no awareness, consultation with the resource owners or lower levels of government, leaders or the public in general about this activity? Number three, Mr. Deputy Speaker, these boats appear to have left the harbour. Are they currently fishing in Milne Bay waters? Number four, Mr. Deputy Speaker, what assurances do we have that they will not take stock from the archaeological waters of Milne Bay, as currently seems to happen with illegal fishing from boats from Southeast Asian countries? Number five, Mr. Deputy Speaker, can the Minister ensure that proper engagement and consultation and awareness is conducted for this and any other future licensing of fisheries activities, whether it be in Milne Bay or in any other province? And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I note the question, I believe last week, from Member for Asala regarding Jomad Passage and a similar issue relating to consultation. And I also noticed the concerns raised by Honourable James Donald in relation to Penyang and consultation with low-level governments, with landowners, and with leaders is very, very important. And this is another case in point. I put these questions to our good Minister for Fisheries. Thank you.
Honourable Minister for Fisheries.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and thank you, Long. Member of Long, Halatau, Honourable Charles Abel, Long, all questions I'm asking. In regard to the first question I'm asking, I think I've been messaging me time, I'm looking some boats been go down Long, Halatau. Now maybe forwarding all questions and issues where I'm raising, maybe forwarding go along, Managing Director of NFA at that time. I've been maybe talk me mas salim some lilik brief ko long office long so that we can save long also something. Unfortunately, I think from the way questions I'm asking, I think we realize him was all this answers where I'm all supposed long right in the salim ko long I think I'm not been kissing. So bami Dr. Quantum all office line domina ba make all this answers long na I think bami give him maybe tomorrow. Number two, I think in terms of awareness, long all this owners long boats, licensing long all fisheries in Chatlo country and board them sabi making. The only license where Mr. Panitlo jurisdiction blomi long somebody like wara close to long Daruna, this la dog log area long Yumi lo country. That's the only area where I'm come directly underneath the jurisdiction blomi as a minister. Otherwise, all narapla licensing, I'm so go through long board long mipla. As you people probably would understand is that the board is an independent process that actually takes into account everything. Firstly, there must be some management plans in place. Once the management plans are in place, based on the management plans, the board actually issues the license. So there's something that's way, something where we know really actively take part on them. But since member blo alatao embracing these issues, bami lulu ko inside long lislana, bami give him insight in regard long lisla 5 vessels where leader you ask him. In terms long licensing, like me talk, you get him time like make him licensing and this board, say make him licensing based long application where come inside na based long this management plan where this particular fish species where like commercial species were like or like harvest him. So this process of me talk I'm quite independent. I'm step on them board long NFA. So something where time on racing issues so now I'm racing. Now but me take him up on them board. I'm something where directly me gonna influence him board la talk him all this number of fish on him all this companies come so if I give him license na kind of so all this something I'm step on them board. So time I'm racing issues now in line one time all this 5 ships where we talk one company where all this ships belong to bami kissing this issues up on them board bami write long all na bami talk all provide him a brief so that bami provide him all this answers or relevant answers long member long mipla. Thank you, True Deputy Speaker.
All member for Abao.
Speaker, question blomi no got notice lo paper. I'm going Minister of State-owned enterprises. It's a very simple question and requiring one answer. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it was brought to my notice that our citizens who wish to fly from one part of the country to another, if they don't have a bank card, and as you and I know, majority of our people don't have banking accounts, and therefore they don't have cards. So when they turn up to pay their tickets, and if the minister can correct this, because I've been told that they are charged a cash surcharge fee of 10%. I'm through. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I believe that our national flag carrier can look at other options for revenue rather than this particular option. And some of the reasons they were given was for handling cash. How much do you have to do to handle cash from Air Niugini to the Air Niugini bank account in BSP, which is just down the road? So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, my simple question is because it's really causing a lot of inconvenience and also difficulties with the rural majority who wants to use our flag carrier to fly from one part of the country to another. I'm asking the good minister if he could relook at this, if it's confirmed, and to remove this surcharge because the difficulties that our rural, and we want our people to travel from province to province to expose themselves, but this plus surcharge, I'm no good plan. Me believe I'm no good plan. I'm asking the good minister to review it and to remove it. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Minister for State and Enterprise.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for Abao, Sir Pugatema, for asking this important question.
I can confirm that this is happening, and I can also assure the member and, of course, the Parliament and our people that this was not something that was directed by this government or the board of KCH. It was, I believe, an entirely commercial decision made by New Guinea as a company operating on its own in competition with others. I'm also aware that even banks like BSP are also charging similar fees. So I will ask the good member to allow me time to seek justification from New Guinea management why that is the case. And I can confirm that it is happening. And I personally, as an individual, do not believe that this is the right thing to do. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Honourable members, our question time has lapsed. Minister for Justice.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to statutes, I present the annual management reports for the Department of Justice Attorney General for the years 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021. Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of Parliament to make a statement in connection with the reports.
Is the leave granted? Leave granted. Minister, make your speech.
Mr. Speaker, in accordance with Section 32 of the Public Service Management Act 1995, I present to this Honourable House and the people of Papua New Guinea the Department of Justice and Attorney General, also acronym as DJAG's, Annual Management Report for 2021 and the Annual Management Reports for the preceding years of 2020, 2019 and 2018. The key implementing document for DJAG is the DJAG Corporate Plan of 2019 to 2023. The 5 strategic priorities that the activities of DJAG are aligned to are: the first, a focused and revitalized village courts system; the second strategy, a revitalized crime prevention approach; a third strategy, strengthened communications and information management systems; the fourth, integrity and professionalism of DJAG business; and the final strategy, being the fifth, the infrastructure and capital works program. Mr. Speaker, tremendous effort has been put into the staff of DJAG to address the 5 strategic areas in 2021. The key highlights against these strategic priorities are: the first, a focused and revitalized village court system and infrastructure and capital works program. The crime prevention through revitalized village court system strategy was endorsed by the NEC Council. The crime prevention through the revitalized village court system strategy is well underway, with implementation activities commenced in 10 provinces, including work on building of village courts houses, completion of audit of village courts in the autonomous region of Bougainville, Morabe, Hela provinces. The village court policy of 2020 to 2030 was developed and endorsed by NEC in December 2021. The implementation of the policy will complement the work of the crime prevention through revitalized village court system strategy. The second strategy in 2021 is a revitalized crime prevention approach. Funding support under an established MOU arrangements was provided to partners to address the gender-based violence and including sorcery accusations related to violence. MOUs with Ijivitari, Ore Province, Kandep, Enga Province for the constructions of the community justice system centers have been concluded. The Community Justice Service Center coordinators, training, deployment, supervision and coordination were part of the activities towards the revitalized crime prevention approach strategy. Funding support was also provided to assist with the renovation of the prison chapel at Boram, East Sepik Province and Gili Gili, Milne Bay Province for the correctional service facility renovations. The Strengthening Communications and International Cyber Security Center and the Cisco Australia to work towards strengthening DJAG's communication and information management systems. The Department of ICT Policy has been developed. The new parole board, release on license, human rights and power of mercy database has been designed. The integrity and professionalism of DJAG business. DJAG engaged Kumulsoft Limited, a 100% locally owned company, to develop and formalize a fixed asset management system as part of the relocation exercise from Sir Buri Kidu House to the West New Britain House. Continued legal education for lawyers has been rolled out again in 2021 with the support of the Australian government, where lawyers under CLE on legal reasoning and analysis by the Australian Government Solicitor, and on contracts in resource sector by Athos lawyers. The Department's relocation of the 22 branches into a newly built West New Britain House will allow ease of accessibility for clients. Mr. Speaker, in 2021, the Department was appropriated the operational budget to sustain its operations until end of the year, including assistance from the Government of PNG, development funding, and donor support to some of our core functions. The financial executive summary are captured in annexures in these respective reports. However, I make reference to the 2021 financial executive summary since it's the most recent annual management report going before Parliament. There was an increase of 9.8 million in addition to the original budget appropriation of 122.9 million, which adds to the total warrant released of 132.8 million in the 2021 financial year. Details of the increase are in the financial executive summary. The DJAG main operating account is where all the department's expenditure recurrent development is drawn from. The bank reconciliation report statement enables reconciliations of the department's cash book transactions against its bank account held with Bank of PNG. The result of the statement will be a debit balance and will be shown when the reconciliation is complete once the IFMS system access is restored to DJAG. The reconciliation report indicates that there is a good stewardship on the main operation account and the department and will be produced once completed. The DJAG financial report for the period of the 1st of January to the 31st of 2021 is produced and presented in summary expenditure only for the recurrent budget of 2021 according to the requirements of the Public Finance Management Act and its financial instructions. Mr. Speaker, the key highlights in 2021 on DJAG's key result areas include 38 bills given legal clearance and passed by Parliament in 2022 of the 2021. Of the bills, 6 bills were high priority bills for the country, and DJAG were fully drafted and facilitated by the Department and passed in last Parliament sitting in November 2021. These are the Lawyers Amendment Act, Controlled Substance Act, Consequential Amendment to the Dangerous Drugs Act, Electronic Transaction Act, Public Solicitors Act, and the consequential amendment to the Attorney General's Act as a consequential amendment. Providing support to the Marape government, Basel government's effort in addressing the autonomous region in Bougainville, referendum and related affairs. Supporting the social law and order sector agencies by assisting with their policies and programs for approval in Cabinet. Facilitated and progressed 45 sponsored and supported NEC submissions to Cabinet. The Office of the Solicitor General successfully defended and dismissed a compensation claim worth 1.5 billion in the National Court human rights case of Razid Dullah and 642 others versus Petro Thomas and the state. Administratively established the State Audit and Recovery Team, compromising of DJAG officers in collaboration with other government departments to audit failed projects, contracts, and initiative legal proceedings against defaulted contractors or state-awarded contracts worth millions of kina. DJAG is anticipated through the State Audit Recovery Team to save the state millions of kina worth of revenue. Drafting of 4 DJAG annual management reports and statutory reports for the National Lands Commission and Probational Services, Parole Services, and Juvenile State Justice Services. Mr. Speaker, there were many challenges and experiences throughout the year at various levels of government, including the hacking of the integrated financial management system that caused major setbacks for implementation activities. Despite all the odds, much was accomplished by DJAG. In support of the progressive work done thus far, it is recommended that going forward, activities such as the State Audit Recovery Team and others be adequately resourced by the government to safeguard state commitments and ensure monitoring and accountability of procurement processes of state contracts. DJAG's annual management report for 2020 to 2018. Mr. Speaker, DJAG's annual reports of 2020 to 2018 highlights achievements by DJAG throughout the 3 years. In the interest of time, I will mention only a select few, as all the details are in the reports and the full version of this speech. The year 2020, despite the negative impacts of the coronavirus pandemic, COVID-19, DJAG delivered its key result areas. Among the achievements was the passage of 4 pieces of legislation, namely the Pandemic Act of 2020, the Organic Law on the Independent Commission Against Corruption, the Whistleblowers Act of 2020, the Public Creator Amendment Act 2020, and the gazettal of the State of Emergency Regulations, Emergency Orders, and Directives. Year 2019, Mr. Speaker, in 2019, DJAG approved 6 corporate objectives and 5 strategic priorities, captured and updated in DJAG's corporate plan of 2019 to 2023. The strategic priority areas include refocused and revitalized village court systems, revitalized crime prevention system, strengthened communication and information management system, integrity and professionalism of DJAG's business and operations, and infrastructure capital works programs. Among the achievements was initiated of the new Controlled Substance Bill and Whistleblowers Bill. In 2018, Mr. Speaker, in 2018 marked an end of the delivery of the 5-year DJAG corporate plan, 2014 to 2018. Achievements include the passage of 4 pieces of legislation, namely the Summary Offences Act, Amendment Act, the Parole Amendment Act, Village Courts Amendment Act, and the Probation Amendment Act. DJAG plans going forward for 2022. Mr. Speaker, for the year 2022, going forward, the focus is to implement the crime prevention through the revitalized village court strategy of 2020 to 2030, to be led by the village courts and land mediation secretariat. Mr. Speaker, the implementation activities and the strategies include audits, reviews of Village Courts Act, regulations, review of training manuals, etc., and are vital to the performance of village court officials. Mr. Speaker, work plans and strategies reported in the 4DJAG annual management report present progressive updates that work together to mitigate social and law and order issues that challenge law enforcement in the community. I thank the DJAG leadership, in particular Dr. Eric Kwa, Attorney General, Secretary for Justice, and members of the senior management team for their efforts in keeping DJAG on track in implementation of the corporate plan. I thank the staff in the department of their contributions towards the discharge of justice services. Mr. Speaker, I submit the annual management reports of 2021, and I note that this would be a record for any department to bring a previous year's submission in the first 2 months, as well as the outstanding 2020, 2019, and 2018 to this Honourable House.
The question is that the question be put. Our Leader of Government Business.
I move that the Parliament take note of the paper and the debate be adjourned and make an order of the day for a subsequent sitting.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. Ayes have it. Minister for Justice.
This one. Where's the speech? Oh. Pursuant to statute, I present the final report 3 of the Constitutional Law Reforms Commission on the review and ex parte proceedings dated May 2013. Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of Parliament to make a statement in connection with the report.
Is the leave granted? Minister, make your speech.
Mr. Speaker, the members of this Honourable House, it is my pleasure to present Parliament the Constitutional Law and Reform Commission review of ex parte proceedings, Report 2013. In 2006, in accordance with Section 12 of the Constitutional Law Reform Commission Act of 2004, the Minister for Justice then, Honourable Bire Kimasipa, issued a term of reference number 3 of the Constitutional Law Reform Commission to review the ex parte proceedings in Papua New Guinea. Mr. Speaker, the Commission, with its assistance of a working committee comprising of member representation from my department, the National Judicial Service, Staff Services, the Magisterial Service, Office of the Public Solicitor, and the PNG Law Society, conducted a one-day seminar, regional consultations, roundtable discussions, and one-on-one meetings with individual stakeholders, agencies to gauge views and recommendations that form this final report. Mr. Speaker, the ex parte is a Latin phrase that means of the one part, one-sided. As such, an ex parte statement is a statement of only one side, and an injunction granted ex parte is an injunction granted under hearing only one side. Simply put, ex parte proceedings are legal actions brought by one person in the absence of and without the representation of another party. Mr. Speaker, the purpose of the review was to ascertain whether the rules in civil litigation where the state is a party relating to matters being heard ex parte should be modified, and if so, how should it be revised so as to better serve the interest of justice to all parties concerned. Mr. Speaker, the Commission was asked to conduct inquiries and reports on how ex parte applications affect the state. The issues involved matters of public finance, administration of justice, the performance of ministers of state, officials, lawyers, and apparent loss of huge amounts of public monies. Court issue ex parte orders when such circumstances arise. An official or office holder is sacked, seeks judicial review of the sacking, and the court orders the interim without notifying the state or temporary reinstatement while the full case is being prepared for trial, and grants the application for leave to apply for judicial review with the state lawyer being in court, or the court makes an award of damages against the state because no government lawyer was in court at the hearing, perhaps and generally because the state was not properly notified of the hearing. Mr. Speaker, the concern at the time this term of reference was issued was around the courts granting ex parte orders which had great impact on individuals and the state, and they were not given the opportunity to represent themselves or give their statement in court proceedings. The ex parte proceedings and others resulted in the state incurring huge debts when individuals and organizations sued the state for civil liabilities. Sometimes the claims are found to be false or misleading after the orders or payments have been made, prompting a review of this practice which became critical, hence the term of reference of the Commission. Mr. Speaker, there were other related laws that were reviewed upon the completion of this report in 2013 after conducting regional consultations with key stakeholders. One primary piece of legislation that is important in ex parte application process is the Claims by and Against the State Act of 1996. In essence, the Act is to prepare the state to defend civil lawsuits brought against it. It provides jurisdiction for the state to be sued and furthermore governs the court practice and procedure for matters by and against the state. Hence, if the state defaults in complying with the current law, the practice in either defending or prosecuting a claim, the claimant may of its own motion move that the court for proceedings in an ex parte application. Mr. Speaker, the Commission looked at the legislative framework, practices and procedures relating to ex parte proceedings for purposes of recommending relevant reform proposals amid a better managing ex parte proceedings. The capacity of the state to effectively defend civil matters and prevent default judgments was also a concern raised by many citizens during the Commission's consultation phase. Having considered all the information before it, the Commission produced the final report in 2013. The recommendations of law reform proposals aimed at protecting the state from unwarranted liabilities resulting from ex parte proceedings without limiting the rights of the aggrieved parties. The recommended proposals are aimed at strengthening the grounds and circumstances, processes and procedures for ex parte proceedings against the state, to which both an aggrieved and the courts must observe and adhere to. Mr. Speaker, the recommendation made in this final report for reforms in civil litigation, particularly where the state is a party, recommends for amendments to be made to the Claims by and Against the State Act in 1996 and consequential amendment to the Police Force Act of 1998 and the Wrongs and Miscellaneous Provisions Act of 1975 to complement the proposed amendments to the Claims by and Against the State Act. Way forward. Mr. Speaker, my department is currently reviewing the Act to identify loopholes and provide possible legislative amendments incorporating relevant current practice for better delivery of justice. Updating this piece of legislation will reflect necessary changes recommended by this report. It is important that these reform proposals are considered to save the state from unnecessary claims that continue to incur huge costs on the state. With that, I now submit the Constitutional Law and Reform Commission review of ex parte proceedings, Report 2013, to this Honourable House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I move that the Parliament take note of the paper and the debate be adjourned and made an order of the day for a subsequent sitting.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. Ayes have it. The Honourable Minister for Justice.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to statute, I present the final report 6 of the Constitutional Law Reform Commission on the review of environmental and mining laws relating to the management and disposal of tailings, September 2015. Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of this Parliament to make a statement in connection with this report.
Is the leave granted? Minister, make your speech.
Mr. Speaker and members of this Honourable House, it is my pleasure to present the Parliament's Constitutional Law and Reform Commission's final reports on the review of the environmental and mining laws relating to the management and disposal of tailings. Mr. Speaker, to provide some background, in 2007, the Minister for Justice then, Bireki Masipa, issued a Terms of Reference in Constitutional and Law Reform Commission to review the environmental and mining laws relating to the management and disposal of tailings in Papua New Guinea. The reference was issued in response to the publicity given by a study of alleged toxicity levels in the river system and surrounding environment of the Angabanga River, owing to tailings waste disposal from the Tolokuma gold mine. The primary objective of the reference was to inquire into the review of the systematic development and reform of laws relating to the management and disposal of tailings, including the containment and treatment of toxic chemicals and heavy metals, with the intervention of making them consistent with the industry and world best practice standards. The Commission was required to review the Environmental Act of 2000 and Mining Act of 1992 to ascertain whether the existing legal framework provided effective mechanisms to secure the health and well-being of our people and the environment. The Commission was also directed to consult with relevant stakeholders, including the industry practitioners, to establish the actual practice undertaken in managing and disposing mine tailings. Mr. Speaker, the Commission set up a working committee comprising of relevant government departments and organizations which undertook the review. The public and stakeholder consultations were undertaken from April 2013 to April 2014. A draft report containing all the reform proposals was developed and discussed at a public seminar in July 2014, which led to the final report that was completed in 2015. Mr. Speaker, the final report on the environmental and mining law relating to the management and disposal of tailings, report number 6, found a lot of loopholes and gaps in the legal framework on management and disposal of tailings in the country. The final report contains 18 recommendations proposed for both legislative and administrative reforms. For example, recommendation number 5 of this report proposes for the amendment to the Mining Act of 1992 to provide for a total ban on riverine tailings disposal method for future mines. This method of tailing disposal is only practiced in 2 countries, Papua New Guinea and Indonesia. Other important reform proposals are contained in the final report. Some of these recommendations are immediately implementable, whilst others require additional actions or directions from the government. Therefore, it is important that Parliament considers this report. Mr. Speaker, I take this opportunity to thank the Commission and the Working Committee for conducting the review and compiling the final report. Mr. Speaker, with that, I now submit the final report of the review of the environmental and mining law relating to the management and disposal of tailings to this Honourable House.
Acting Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I move that the Parliament take note of the paper and the debate be adjourned and made an order of the day for subsequent sitting.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those in favour say aye. Those against say no. Ayes have it. The Minister for Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I seek the chair to make a ministerial speech.
Is the leave granted?
Thank you, Mr.
Minister.
Speaker. I stand in this Honourable House to deliver this important ministerial statement that will inform the people of Parliament and our people on the progress of transition of the energy wing of the Department of Petroleum and Energy to the new entity, that is the National Energy Authority. However, before I continue into the main content of my statement, I want to, on behalf of my people, our Kapa electorate and my family, to take this opportunity to thank Honorable Prime Minister James Marape of our beloved country, Papua New Guinea, for appointing me to the portfolio of Minister for Energy and rural development in his government. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is very challenging given the difficulties in transitional period. However, most importantly, is we should appreciate that reforms do come with major challenges, especially changing of institutional structures, systems and processes, and the reorganization and movement of human capital to ensure the administration is set to focus on the new renewable energy programs and projects, as well as clean energy going forward. I must commend the leadership of Prime Minister, Honorable James Marape, MP, for recognizing and personally ensuring that the new independent energy regulator, the National Energy Authority, is properly established and gets off the ground. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in hindsight, I must also commend the ministers appointed before me, initiating the groundwork for the reform and being responsible for progressing the changes in the energy service sector and the electricity industry. This initiative for reform started some years ago and came to fruition in the year 2020. Hence, in my view, is one of, or if not the most critical and important decision made by our Parliament as we work together progressively towards our MTDP and Vision 2050. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the reform to the electricity sector and the establishment of the National Energy Authority is profound. This has the potential to industrialize the PNG economy. Mr. Deputy Speaker, on 21st April 2021, this Honorable House passed the National Energy Authority Act 2021 and the Electricity Industry Amendment Act 2021. The acts became operational upon Gazettal on the 6th of July 2021. The publishing of the notice in the Gazette gave effect for the establishment of the National Energy Authority, which is now effectively responsible for regulating of electricity supply industry, for both the technical and economic regulation of the sector. Mr. Deputy Speaker, our Honorable Prime Minister James Marape launched in August 2019 the country's National Energy Policy 2017 to 2027. In his speech, Prime Minister Honorable James Marape stated that the need to bring electricity to our people, and I echo his statement for each of us and those that may replace us in the future to take to heart this statement and continue to pursue this noble vision. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "In contemporary PNG, energy is the key to unlock PNG from present state of underdevelopment, progress, and well-being of our people. Electricity is a key enabler for economic and human development. Without cheap and reliable electricity for our people, we will not progress much." End of quote. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there has been much talk on how best we must address the electricity and power issues of the country, as there has also been much debate on the performance of our SOE PNG Power Limited. The government's effort to establish the National Energy Authority is the correct step to address the energy issues. The creation of the NEA now removes the regulatory function of PPL and ICCC on all policy matters, and technical and economic regulation of electricity and energy services are now with the NEA. This now gives the opportunity for comprehensive reform of PPL to be a fully viable entity through the sale of power to consumers. Establishment of the National Energy Authority. Mr. Speaker, following the Gazettal of the National Energy Authority Act of 2021 and the Electricity Industry Amendment Act of 2021, in consultation with the Department of Personnel Management and Salaries, Conditions and Monitoring Committee, first approved an interim structure and then follow through with the approval of the permanent structure. Mr. Deputy Speaker, on the appointment of the NEA board, I'm happy to inform Parliament that the NEC has approved the appointment of the NEA board, the non-ex-official members, and are Mr. Joseph Gabut, an experienced and senior Papua New Guinean. And Mr. Raymond Resi, a young Papua New Guinean and a qualified environment scientist as a deputy chairman. The ex-official members are the Managing Director of the NEA and the Secretary of the Department of National Planning and Monitoring and Treasury. I'm also happy to inform the Parliament on the appointment of the Acting Managing Director in January by NEC, Mr. Ronald Maketa, a professional in petroleum and energy space, who was previously the Chief Petroleum Inspector to the independent state of Papua New Guinea and a key technical advisor to the recently concluded Pingyan and Papua LNG project gas agreement, another milestone for Pangu Party. The new acting MD has already introduced key government initiatives to operationalize the authority to operate more effectively and efficiently. The acting MD has already progressed the off-grid electricity regulations aggressively, and NEA is in the final consultation stage before submitting to NEC for its blessing. Acting MD has also further prioritized key policies and regulations that has to be approved before government goes into recession. Regulatory licensing and compliance and policy responsibilities. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the NEA has started performing its legal mandate by starting discussions with relevant stakeholders in regard to its regulatory licensing, compliance and policy matters. I gave an update of consultations we have undertaken since becoming operational. PNG Power Limited, an independent consumer and competition commission. The NEA has been meeting with PPL and other stakeholders on the progress of the Ramutu project. Meetings are also held with the National Planning Department, with donor agencies and PEP countries on their pledge for support to the energy sector during the 2017 APEC meeting. NEA is in continuous consultation with the Department of National Planning and Monitoring and the World Bank on the National Electrification Rollout Plan narrow agenda. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there are some issues now emerging with the PEP initiative coming from the 2018 APEC summit. NEA has provided a brief to Prime Minister and an NEC paper for government directions as to how to address this, and it could have a serious effect on the effort of the government in regard to electricity and energy services. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this country lacks major policies into energy, and a key mandate for NEA is to look into and bring to government, working with key government departments and stakeholders, and legislation, policy relating to hydro, solar, and geothermal and other renewable energy sources. I am happy to inform Parliament that NEA is progressing work into this and is concluding discussion on the country's off-grid policy. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the off-grid policy will cater for the majority of our people not covered by the PNG power grid. This is important for the government as we talk about taking back PNG and promoting small businesses and economic development for our people. The off-grid policy will seek to guide the generation of power and electricity services and to be inclusive of the community wanting to get into power generation and electricity services at a lower scale, but important for communities. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as per the NEA Act, I intend to bring this off-grid regulation to the Governor-General for his signature to make effective the regulation in the first quarter of the year 2020. Major energy projects, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to also inform Parliament of a significant signing of the Master Development Agreement with Australian company Fortescue Future Industries for the development of emerging global new energy source, hydrogen and ammonia. Industrialist countries like Japan has set its energy target to reach 10% of its total energy mix using hydrogen by 2030. With the investment decision by FFI in the hydrogen and ammonia space set the pace for Papua New Guinea to be a leader in the clean, green energy and reach our net carbon zero targets. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I thank the Honorable Prime Minister and the National Executive Council for appointing me as the Prime Minister's special envoy to Glasgow, Scotland, for the sign-off ceremony with Fortescue owner and Australian billionaire Dr. Andrew Forrest. Mr. Deputy Speaker, despite the many critics, I must state that the travel to Glasgow, and especially for this signing, is a historic and places our beautiful country, Papua New Guinea, on the map of leading countries embarking on saving the earth amid the climate change concerns. Our signing with Fortescue Future Industries will see the company, in partnership with the state, develop 7 hydro projects and 11 geothermal projects, and likely projects to start early is the Kikori Wabo hydro project and the West New Britain geothermal projects, with development investment worth an estimate of 500 million, with the projects planned to start on or about 2027 to 2028. However, the country will be massive, including employment for locals and professionals alike, spin-off benefits and many more benefits. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the signing of the Master Development Agreement will see the start of future further negotiations with the state going towards project development. May I take this opportunity on the floor of this Parliament to commend Fortescue Future Industries and Dr. Andrew Forrest for their commitment to engage with PNG in these significant projects, which will be our country's flagship model project as a commitment to the 2050 vision of 100% renewable energy used in the country by 2050, and support the government's intent to bring electricity to 70% of households by 2030 and 100% by 2050. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is an exciting and very important project initiative for our country, and the further announcement will be made pending our finalization of discussions. Therefore, I take this opportunity to encourage young Papua New Guineans to go into the field of physics, chemistry, and molecular studies, especially in hydrogen and other energy sources study. The future is no longer fossil fuel, but clean and renewable energy. And therefore, I urge our young people to study subjects for our future. In other major projects, NEA will continue discussion with Enviro Energy Park project in Leh City, Morobe Province, as proposed by Mayu Resources. Our concern on the use of coal remains our priority to ensure we look at alternatives. The NEC has already approved, in principle, the massive 300 megawatts Usino Solar Power Farm project in the Ramu Valley. The Edevo Hydropower project, a 54 megawatt generation project in the Central Province, will be commissioned shortly this year. That Devon's 5 megawatts hydro project in Oro Province has been commissioned and is up and running, connecting on grid and providing electricity services. Discussions are progressing on Karamui Hydropower project in Simbu Province. The gas power project facilitated by both New Power Limited and Dirio Power Limited outside of Port Moresby City has been commissioned and operational. PPL will launch a solar project on the historic island of Samarai in Milembe Province by this year. NEA is in initial discussions with the Livestock Development Authority for a partnership agreement for the development of solar farms on LDA land around the country to support the LDC livestock program for its energy needs and for the provision of electricity to surrounding communities. NEA is in discussion with PNG Power and its partners for major solar project in East New Britain and a possible rollout across the country. Total Energies, the leading global energy business leader and operator of the Papua LNG project, is considering producing power from renewables, especially hydro and solar, for its LNG project, both upstream and downstream of the business value stream, respectively. Administrative finance and operational work funding. Deputy Speaker, whilst we have embarked on major projects and, as the saying goes, hit the ground running, where we have progressed as a new authority with some good support from government, the Department of Finance have assisted NEA to open its operating account and is in discussion with the Department of Treasury and have accessed some funding for its operation while awaiting further release of the remaining support. Mr. Deputy Speaker, NEA is in close consultation with the Department of Treasury national planning and monitoring to continue, coordinate funding, support through bridging and grant options. NEA is also seeking the same support through the National Executive Council and also regional and international partners, especially our PEP partners. Mr. Deputy Speaker, transitioning out of the Department of Petroleum and Energy, there are legacy issues we must move to resolve quickly. We cannot afford to run a public service type approach to managing our electricity industry and the energy service sector. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the emergence of the National Energy Authority is to establish a one-stop shop organization that is responsible for the technical and economical regulations and licensing of the electricity and energy business in the country. An authority that is efficient and effective in monitoring issuance of approvals and proper compliance handling. Therefore, it is important all impacted stakeholders can work closely with NEA as the sole regulator of the electricity and energy business in the country. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the establishment of NEA is the beginning of reforms in this sector. But also, while we demand effective work and compliance, the NEA must also be compliant to the modern practices of management as the regulator and policy body managing the electricity industry. The industry and the people demand this from NEA. Permanent structure, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The smooth transition of NEA has been seriously affected by funding issues and barriers being faced, and I urge all relevant ministers and department heads to work in harmony and to assist with the establishment of NEA. As I earlier stated, the approval of the National Energy Policy 2017-2027 and the NEA Act establishing the National Energy Authority is the single most critical and important decision of the Marape Basil government to achieve the government's vision to take back Papua New Guinea. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is the foundation and the enabler for Papua New Guinea to become economically independent, and is the only state institution created by Prime Minister Honorable James Marape in his term as the Prime Minister. This is the legacy for Prime Minister and the government to bring electricity to Papua New Guinea and to establish the stepping stone towards economic independence. Mr. Deputy Speaker, while I stated that the NEA has difficulty in the receipt of funds on one hand, the NEA has already given an approved permanent organizational structure by the Salaries and Conditions Monitoring Committee and the Department of Personnel Management. This is important for NEA as we need to begin to recruit technical and professional personnel and to start the real work. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have a project to deliver by 2030 and 2050, and I urge state agencies responsible for funding and personnel to be able to support us as we begin this massive exercise to power up Papua New Guinea. Work plan and other stakeholders. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the NEC has approved the NEA work plan going forward, and NEA will be organizing workshops with all stakeholders to discuss the rollout of electricity services to 70% of population by 2030 and the entire country by 2050. This meeting will with relevant stakeholders as per the work plan schedule, including current and proposed IPPs, provincial governments, and other stakeholders, with these discussions scheduled to begin this month, but pending the release of funds. NEA intends to have a regional consultation meeting and will invite all stakeholders to discuss the issue of electricity and energy services. Most importantly, having dialogue with provincial governments and district administrators to align all plans for combined electricity rollout. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we do not have much time left. Therefore, the NEA seeks support from the relevant ministers for Treasury, Finance and National Planning, and in general, all government agencies to achieve the vision for electricity access to 70% of PNG households by 2030. The urgency is real, with only 8 years to 2030, hence the urgency to replace all efforts and make this the first policy of this government for NEA to perform its mandated duty and responsibility to respond to the timeline set by our government for electricity to reach 70% of our household by 2030. Mr. Deputy Speaker, our government is showcasing Papua New Guinea as the emerging energy hub. Our nearest neighbor, Australia, has announced that it wants to be the regional energy hub, thus posing a challenge to our desire to be the regional energy hub. China is expanding its clean energy projects. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Papua New Guinea, with all its renewable energy resources in place, will aim to be the renewable energy hub of the Asia-Pacific region. The NEA is working on a master energy development framework that will encompass all projects currently existing and future retrospectively. The way forward is for our government to declare our energy effort as its #1 priority, as the enabler to economic independence and the catalyst for all other developments in all sectors to make Papua New Guinea a modern nation. Mr. Deputy Speaker, taking back Papua New Guinea means nothing if energy and electricity industry is not given priority. The energy sector is the key enabler to any economic development, and the passing of the legislation signals the intention of the government to realign all efforts in the energy sector for the common vision of the government to make Papua New Guinea truly independent. We have not gone wrong in our efforts. Our country is rich in sources of energy from oil, gas, solar, geothermal, hydro, tidal energy, coal, and biomass. And if harnessed together well, we can be the energy supplier to the demand for the energy. Data states that PNG has significant proven reserves of fossil fuel from both oil, gas, and coal. We have large river systems that can produce up to 15,000 megawatts of hydroelectric power and another 52,500 from geothermal reservoirs, according to established feasibility study. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Papua New Guinea has 200 days of sunshine, 365 days of breeze for solar and wind power. Fertile soil and natural vegetation in our tropical paradise provides the ideal environment for abundant sources of fuel stock for bioenergy. Numerous channels and passageways in our maritime regions hold untold energy capacity from oceans current yet to be explored. All these energy sources are sufficient to meet our domestic requirements of power transmission, industrial development as well, for regional export to Asian tiger economies. So it is a significant reform we have undertaken. Mr. Deputy Speaker, history will judge us one day, but for me and the Marape Basil government, we strongly believe we are in the right pathway for truly taking back Papua New Guinea. You, me, and all of us are here, heading for elections very soon. On my part, it is my duty to inform those that will come into Parliament to form government after the elections. Our future as an independent country, we must continue to strengthen this effort by ensuring all things are done in a competent and diligent manner to manage the National Energy Authority and to bring electricity to our people as we the positive outcome of this effort. Mr. Deputy Speaker, year in, year out, we talk about bringing light and electricity to our people. Yet the majority of people live in darkness. Our children do not have light to do their schoolwork. Our health centers and schools do not have electricity. Our people travel long distances to access electricity for education, health, and other services. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we must do this right once and for all. We must place this as our first and foremost priority. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to this Honorable House, and I commit this statement to Parliament.
The Honorable Prime Minister.
I rise to offer a comment in support, and other members of Parliament may join me in speaking later. But before I do so, I move that Parliament take note of this important statement, and I wish to offer commendations and commentaries in support. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the National Energy Authority bill was passed and it is now an act of Parliament. And I just want to thank the members of this Parliament for ensuring that this move into having the National Energy Authority established was given support by both sides of the House when the Minister presented his bill in 2021. Excuse me, I beg your pardon. And let me from our front comment the hardworking Minister for Energy, the Honorable Saki Soloma, him and his team, when he was conferred this portfolio, He took in a portfolio that had no structure, that had no office, that had nothing except the word energy. Mr. Speaker, all of us know energy is the driver of all motions on planet Earth and in the universe. Harnessing properly of energy to ensure it is produced into usable products for the sustenance and assistance of our life is important. We deliberately, as government, moved to set up this National Energy Authority so that our country, which is energy surplus, has abundant energy sources, we could properly tap into these energy sources, not only for domestic use, but also for export into the future. And as the Minister did make mention in his speech, the source of energy prevalent in our country in abundance. We know commonly oil and gas as energy sources. We also know hydro, the river streams and hydro potentials as energy sources. But we are venturing into solar, we're venturing into geothermal, we're venturing into wind. We have also coal in our portfolio in as far as energy source is concerned. So there's an overabundance of energy sources in our country. But tapping it correctly in a structure that is usable to benefit our country as well as benefit by domestic use of this energy for domestic use, as well as supply for trade and commerce to external market. And so with this line of thought, we set up the National Energy Authority, and the Minister has spoken to us in this regard. Some of you will be wondering, Mr. Speaker, and I just rose to add certain and little bit more clarity. What happens to PNG Power, for instance, today? Mr. Speaker, PNG Power will be one company operating in our country under licensing from National Energy Authority. Today, as it is the status quo, we have PNG Power as a regulator to some extent, a great extent, and then we have them as the company supplying energy, or more so electricity, to our country. Going forward, we'd like to also encourage provincial governments, for instance, those provincial governments who are far off and outside of the grid today, to also think about venturing into having power companies. The autonomous region of Bougainville comes as a number one place where this could be looked into. Place like Manus, New Island, Oro Province, outside of the grid. And so National Energy Authority is set as the government regulator to allow for private power companies to grow, to ensure that we give electricity as the first source of energy at the very earliest to our people. And I noted a quotation that I used was made mention in the good minister's speech, and rightfully so, the statement of intent by this government, as would any government into the future, as it was in the past. For instance, Vision 2050 clearly states that by 2030, 70% of our citizens in our country must have access to electricity. And so it is consistent with the national focus in Vision 2050 and the 3 MTDPs that we've operated thus far. It is also consistent with our own present government's view to ensure that the 30% target is achieved, if not in 2030, at the very earliest. And so we looked into setting up this structure and moving away from the inherent weaknesses and deficiencies we carry through with the present arrangements. So these reforms are totally necessary for us to try to unbundle energy and good energy through our country at the very earliest, especially electricity, so our people can have access to good, reliable, clean energy at the very earliest. I make reference, for instance, to private investment that is right now happening in Edevu, Started in 2009 when then NA-led government gave issue permit for construction of the power plant to be going. I drove through that place unannounced to the central leadership, and I thank the member for Karigiri for his understanding, and the governor for central. I had one suburb, I just thought I'd drive a church on the side of the road and then just drove in. I saw a massive investment by a private sector who's now into final stages of completing this Edebu hydro. So the abundance of energy is in our country, properly harnessing it, tapping it for our domestic use, as well as export. For instance, when Dr. Andrew Forrest and his team from the Fortescue Future Industries came in, they were talking about harnessing 25 gigawatts of power. And I told him, Mr. Investor, I don't think our country has need for 25 gigawatts of power right now. It will take possibly another 10, 15, 20 years. But he informed me it is not for your domestic use. He's trying to harness, split hydrogen molecules to create energy, repackage it, and export this energy through energy users in the region or globally speaking, in pursuit of his view on cleaner energy to be harvested from hydro and other sources of energy. So these conversations are taking place. Our country is a hotspot for various sources of energy, not just from the minerals and the hydrocarbon minerals we have, but also, more importantly, cleaner sources, hydro, geothermal, solar, wind, etc., etc. So we give support to this important body that we're setting up. We're now liberalizing the market. PNG Power just becomes one company, maybe supplying to where you're operating at, but we're also allowing for other private power companies to grow, other industry-based energy companies to grow in our country as one source of revenue, harnessing from the abundance of different sources of energy we have in our country. And this, in my view, is one legacy law that we passed and an institution that we're setting up. And commendation not just to myself and our government here, but more importantly to both sides of the House for setting this authority up so that it allows for private power companies in a regulated space. It allows for also other energy companies to emerge in our country as a source of business, not just for our domestic market, but more importantly, to also generate energy of all types to supply and export also in the process going forward. So I just want to close by commending the minister who have not complained on the task to him. He stepped up and is now setting up a structure in the National Energy Authority going forward. This, in my view, is the authority for the future. The world is driven by energy, the universe is driven by energy, harnessing energy properly to ensure it supports our domestic economy and our country, but more importantly, going forward for the future is important. Let me close in passing. In as far as our focus is concerned, and for whoever comes into government beyond or after the elections, a big vision that we've set up, and some of you may be asking, what about the 4 nations who said they will assist our economy, our country in the electricity space? They're investing, but they're investing in 1 or 2 different areas. When I became Prime Minister in the first instance, I got the 4 nations together. I said our priority is big super grids that connects where the major populations are in the first instance, running from, for instance, Leh to Pogra and Leh to Heights, running from Ramu Valley all the way to Medang, Medang to Sipik, for agriculture along that corridor, fisheries along that corridor, forestry along that corridor, another grid that should be running from Kerema all the way to Alatau. This was, and Kimber to Kokopo in the first instance, up there from Keviang to Namatanai, Buin to back up to Buka. I said, this is the intention of government. We want these major grids to be established. Can you partner us in the first instance? Once that grid is established, you generate energy from wherever in our country, it just infused into this grid that eventually, hopefully in 10 years' time, these grid systems, especially in the mainland and main islands, should be interlinked whilst we work on the isolated grid and power generations in some of our rural island communities and maritime communities and isolated up in the mountains. Our 4 partner nations are supporting to some area, and let me say thank you to them. For instance, Japan government is partnering us in running the 132 kVA grid from Yonki all the way into Leh right now. We're now upgrading 132 from Hagen to Heights to uplift power from Heights to supply it back up there. The missing link between Hagen to Yonki, we're now working on a program with the Chinese Exim to get this program, this spot sorted out. So we removed the 66 kVA line and we step it up to 133 kVA line, 132 kVA line, I beg your pardon. That should run from Hagen to Yonki. That will complete the grid from Leh all the way up into the Inner Highlands. We're looking at a program. I'm still talking to our 4 nations. If they could partner us again, just like Japan is partnering us from Yonki to Leh, we should have one grid that should run from Yonki all the way to Medang, Medang to Bogia, Bogia all the way across the Wewak for the entire Sepik Plain to have access to good power so that we could mobilize those Makam Plain, Ramu Plain, and Sepik Plain for our agriculture, rural industries that we're focusing about. So the next 10 years, whatever combination of leaders that come into our country, the National Energy Authority we're setting up for domestic energy as well as export energy be utilized, but more important in the first instance, that 70% target of Vision 2050 should remain. So the main corridors where the road and people are, if we can overlay with the big power lines to carry the reliable electricity as well as the lower distribution lines to our people, I believe in my heart of hearts that within the next 10 years, all major areas of our country will have reliable electricity, and hopefully in the process, with the competition in private power generation we are allowing to come into play, could reduce the cost of power. And if our country can deliver cheap, reliable power within the next 10 years, we are truly unbundling the potentials of development in our country. So I commend the Minister for the brief on the good work he's doing, and I just want to encourage leadership of the present generation leadership. Energy should remain, as we talk about Connect PNG and other big infrastructures, energy must remain a catalyst and a focus for any generation of leaders going forward. And I just joined the Minister and support him and commend him for the good work he's doing thus far.
The Honourable Minister for State Enterprise.
Speaker, I'd like to commend the Minister for Energy, Honourable Saki Anua, for bringing this very important paper to Parliament. Mr. Speaker and fellow leaders,
Honourable Minister, we have a point of order.
Honourable Saki Soloma, not Saki Hanua from my electorate.
Thank you, the good Honourable Member for Karigiri, for the correction. Once again, my apologies to the good hard-working Minister. Mr. Speaker, the good Minister has actually brought what I think, and may I dare say, is one of the most important ministerial statements ever made in this government as well as in the past. We all talk about our dreams to, Mr. Speaker, to bring electricity to 70% of our people by 2050. And we all talk about the abundant natural resources, and God has blessed this country with oil, gas, geothermal, solar power, hydro, coal, and biomass. And yet, as a country, we've not been able to establish a very important regulatory authority like the Energy Authority, which, under the leadership of our Prime Minister, we've just established. Mr. Deputy Speaker, if I can remember correctly, way back in 2007, when we were discussing the PNG LNG project, there was also discussions on the side about the establishment of an energy authority to regulate the industry. And unfortunately, despite the passage of more than 10 years under 2 different prime ministers, we were not able to actually establish the energy authority. We do have, Mr. Speaker, our #1 state-owned enterprise, which is responsible for production of electricity, PNG Power, but unfortunately, due to the absence of legislation in those many years, PNG Power, due to no choice of its own, was effectively a regulator as well as a provider of electricity service in this country. And PNG Power became self-regulatory in the sense that, and that goes to the historical days when we had Electricity Commission, which then regulated the industry as well. And unfortunately for this country, we had no changes until the decision by the Marabe government to set up this much-needed authority. And with the establishment of the authority, we can actually give that assurance to our foreign investors who have shown interest in helping us commercialize all this energy resource we have. When we have definite arrangements, a definite legislative framework that then sets out the way the independent power producers can be able to set up transmission grids, the provision of transmission lines and the power systems, the number of voltage and so forth, we have to have a regulator that regulates. Those are very important things. So once we have this authority set up, anyone who wants to invest in the energy sphere will then be able to know with some sort of certainty that that investment can be properly regulated, and in the end it will provide a good return for that investment. So what we as a government have done is provided that certainty. Anyone who wants to come to this country to invest in our resources will know that we have an independent regulator who will be able to regulate the standards and the collection of rates, especially together with the rates, in conjunction with the rates set up by the independent commission on the ICCC, rather, Mr. Speaker. So what we have now is a system that now will take care of everyone's concerns. And also, Mr. Speaker, you've heard about the unbelievable rates that have been set up and approved and then being charged by the independent power producers. Mr. Speaker, that reflects the absence of a regulator. Those agreements were signed when this energy authority did not come into place. So with the establishment of this authority, definitely there will be some common sense, and any independent power producer who comes to this country to invest will then know that they have an independent regulator who will be able to keep them honest and will be able to make sure that they charge rates that are compatible with the existing standards in this country and, of course, in the region. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a long overdue matter that, fortunately for this country, our government under the leadership of Mr. Prime Minister Marabe has actually been able to introduce, and I commend the leadership of our Prime Minister as well as the hard-working Minister for Energy for this long overdue energy authority, and everything that we've heard about from our energy minister, and I fully support it, and I think this is something that has been long overdue, and I must once again commend the hard-working minister for this statement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'll take one more speech and then I can entertain the question be put. I'll ask the member for Ijibitari.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and thank you for recognizing the people of Ijibitari. I'd like to, together with the Prime Minister, commend the good minister for his statement, but a very important statement that is delivered to the House today. Energy is a big plus something in the country around the world. You know, everything that we do in our life requires energy. In the Parliament today, we require energy, lights, in order for us to conduct our business here today. So energy plays an integral part of activities block community, activities block government, activities of this House, and even at the rural settings too. Energy plays an important part. So something where me like Gupla Minister or look long where me believe something important something where me need to take on board as part of his ministry over the next 4 or 5 weeks before he go to election. But more importantly, we like making a statement here so that time Parliament may resume again after the elections, that whoever is in charge of this ministry must look at how best we can be able to strengthen and grow and develop the area below energy inside long country below Yumi. Now, one key area me looking where there is no concessions given to key
sectors or key areas within the country. Now, me looking at for example, agriculture is one important area below inside our country. 95% of our rural communities participate in agriculture, fisheries, those kind of economic sector where you can encourage them through cost-saving measures in those energy sectors. Like, for example, suppose agriculture, you mean like promoting agriculture in our country? It is very important that we look at putting concessional rates for businesses or organizations that is participating in agriculture, so that we reduce cost belong electricity, reducing cost belong agriculture so that more people can participate in agriculture, and then it supports the rural communities because of the fact that the cost to operate in agriculture is cheaper. Right now, the agriculture sector is paying the exact same price that a commercial business pays. So it disadvantages the environment or the sector like agriculture to fight for this market space when we are not giving them adequate advantage over other businesses. So these are some areas that me like Minister must take on board to look at putting concessions on electricity rates for businesses that participate in agriculture, businesses that participate in fisheries, businesses that participate in tourism, so that we encourage local communities, local businesses to grow within those particular sectors. Now, me looking also like lo district below me inside lo Ijibitari district, every year MIPLA must budget around 1 million to 1.5 million to roll out our rural electrification program. And that program inside lo district has been one of the most successful projects where MIPLA is launching. So every year MIPLA put him around 1 million, 1.5 million, and it all depends on the DSIP fluctuation every year. So for example, every year when we invest money into solars, we buy for domestic use. So MIPLA is supplying goal all man-staplo place. Now, those of us who live in towns and cities, we think that this is not an important project, but to a person who lives in a rural community and rural setting, this is a life changer for them. Yemelo town, our activity timeline starts at maybe 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, because of the comfort of the power. Time you switch in power on, our activity on that day starts at that particular time. So if we switch the power on at 3 o'clock in the morning and you get up and walk, our activity timeline starts at 3 a.m. in the morning. And it can continue right up to 11, 12 in the night because of the comfort of the energy that we are using in the towns and the cities. Man staplo place, mama staplo place, pikinini staplo place, they don't have that benefit that we have in towns and cities. So when you look a fisherman, when you look at a farmer, when you look at a child that goes to school, now staplo rural settings, when they come, their day starts at 6 in the morning when there's sunlight. And it ends at 6 p.m. in the afternoon when the sun goes down. So their timeline activities is 12 hours a day. After that, they don't function like walk or prepare him house or walk him study or house. It ceases between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. But when you put a solar lighting back in the district, into the rural communities, all of a sudden, a child that has homework can do it at 8, 9 o'clock in the evening. Mama, instead of peeling the banana taro at 3, 4 in the afternoon, she can do it at 7 p.m., 8 p.m. because of the comfort of the light. The activity timeline expands by simply implementing and taking advantage of the solar system that we have. Our country is really blessed. We've got so many natural resources. We can use water, we can use wind, we can use the sun, we can use biogas. The products or byproducts or the waste products, we can use that. We've got so much resource available at our disposal, but the thing is that as government, we are not investing heavily into this area. If we start investing, like me looking as a minister, good minister, I'm like working big work, but his restriction is funding. If our government is serious to fund this type of energy in a rolling will go out to rural communities, then let's put the money behind this kind of ministry so that we can leave a legacy and a footprint in our communities in the rural areas. MIPLA 2 rolling out program below MIPLA. Now every 8 posts we build, solar light must go inside. Police station MIPLA building, solar light must go inside. Classroom MIPLA building, solar light must go inside. They are changing our communities. A teacher can work in the evening now because they've got solar light in the classroom. A parent can work, a child can work in a house after 8, 9 because they've got solar law house. These are important investments we must consider as a government. You mean talk, putting money backside long em, driving this law. And then, of course, we touch our simple people, which is what this country is. If we say that 85, 90% of our people are in the rural communities, then let's touch them with simple projects like this. Energy, let's change their life. So one time this law, me like commenting minister, good plus statement. But some encouragement, me torma long em to kiss him on board to look at subsidizing or putting in concessions in particular sectors where we can support them all. And at the same time, let's look at expanding our solar programs into our rural communities, education, health. Let's run this. It will change our life of our people in our villages. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question is that the question be put. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. Ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we adjourn Parliament to tomorrow 10 a.m. Thank you.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. Honourable members, I adjourn Parliament to tomorrow 10 o'clock a.m.